What's going on, my planting people? My name is Lithius and welcome to Roots Ready. In today's video, we are going to be looking at a plant that I've had in my collection for not 1 or 2, but 3 years. And I am going to be giving you an update on the plant in terms of its growth and also talk you through the care that I provide this plant. So if you want to grow it in your collection, you can have similar results. I first featured this plant on my channel when I did an unboxing experience. And even then I knew that this plant was special because I got it and it was so large, so impressive. Probably up there, probably one of the larger cacti in my collection. I've got a euphorbia, which is quite large, but I've had that one for a long period of time. But this was the first true cactus that I've had that was so large. So you can see this plant was destined for great things. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. This plant hasn't failed me. It hasn't disappointed me at all. Let me show you what it's looking like today. If I pull it across here and lift it, this is it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is my Cereus Blue Cactus. It's also known as the Cereus Peruvianus Blue Cactus. Look at this thing. It is incredible. And the reason why it gets its name, the Blue Cactus, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but the plant has a sort of a dusty, kind of silvery, bluish tinge to it that you can see kind of here, especially as we get closer to the top where the newer growth is. And that is a protective layer that the plant grows. Obviously, cacti grow in very hot environments with lots and lots of UV exposure. So this is in fact a kind of sun protection for this plant. Now, what you want to do is be very careful, as well as trying to avoid the spikes on this bad boy. You want to avoid touching this plant too much, because if you do, the oils on your skin will actually erode that blue sheen, which is one of the reasons why we want this cactus, right? Is that interesting tone that it has. That will actually go away and it won't come back. So once it's gone, it's gone. I mean, damn, I've got the thing on the floor and it's chest height. The plant is just a beast. It's a monster. Up there for one of my favorite cacti in my collection, hands down. So as I said, I've had this plant for 3 years in my collection. So that's about 3 growing seasons. And the plant has almost doubled in height. When I first got this plant, it was around 60 centimeters tall. I never measured it, but looking at my former video, it measures around 60 centimeters. And today, when I measured this plant this morning, it is an impressive 133 centimeters. That's 1.3 meters, 4 foot, 4 inches, or 52.4 inches. Oh my goodness, the plant is a behemoth. It is, I would say, quite a fast growing plant. I've got other cacti in my collection that I've had for a similar amount of time, but none of them competes to the growth on this thing. Every single summer, this thing gives me at least about 20 centimeters worth of growth. So certainly a fast growing plant, and that's something that you should consider if you want this plant in your collection. How long can you keep it growing before it hits the ceiling? That's something to really think about. I'm sure if you're living in an area that is tropical, you can grow this thing outside in the ground if you wish. But for me and everyone else that lives in a sort of a temperate environment like this, like in the UK, you need to consider that sort of that growth as well. Now let's talk about the care for this plant. Now I've got the plant growing in a 9-inch pot, so it's quite a substantial size pot, and I have no intentions of changing the pot or upsizing it anytime soon. I honestly think this thing can probably keep growing in here for another 3 years, maybe even longer, if I'm trying to keep that growth to a minimum. When I look at watering, I find that my cacti are actually quite thirsty in the summer, so I tend to water this Cereus Blue Cactus once every week when it's very, very warm. So you know those days when you're sweating, your plant is also losing water as well. So those ones, I'll go in, give a really good soak about once a week when the weather is really warm. And I'm talking about 25 degrees and upwards, and it's really, really hot. But just outside of summer, when it's not freezing cold, so we're talking about spring and autumn, I will reduce that watering to maybe once every 2 weeks, because again, what you don't want to do is overwater this plant and have it sitting in wet, soaked soil, because that is a recipe for disaster, I tell you. In the winter, I know there are a lot of cacti growers out there that forego watering for that entire period and only start watering the plant again at the start of the growing season. season in the spring. For me, I think that's a little bit too far, and I'm really concerned that the roots will then just start to die off. Then in the spring, when I start watering it again, there's just a mass of dead, rotting organic material in there that can probably harbor a lot of the bacteria and stuff that really promote root rot. So I'm really kind of cautious about that. So what I do instead is in the winter months, I will go and give the plant a very light watering. As I said, it's in a 9-inch pot. So for me, about a half cup of water. So not much, just on the surface, just a little sprinkle about once a month, maybe even longer. And for me, that has worked for all of my cacti. I wait for the soil to get bone dry, very, very dry, and just a light drizzle of water just to sort of sustain and maintain that root system so I don't have to restart it again in the spring. And so far, that's worked an absolute gem, an absolute treat with this plant. One of the things I don't do in the winter is fertilize. I don't fertilize any of my cacti or succulents in the winter. What I've observed is that these plants stop growing almost completely during the winter. There is zero signs of growth. So for me, there's no need to fill the plant with lots and lots of nutrients and have that salt build up in the soil, and that could actually be quite poisonous to the plant. So I completely stop fertilizing in the winter and I pick it up again in the spring. And as I said, I found the Cereus Blue Cactus to be a very fast grower. So in the spring, I start to fertilize every other watering. The other thing you really want to make sure that you're doing with your plant is providing it with as much light as you can. I told you, the blue sheen on this is a protective UV coating for this plant. In effect, it is a sunscreen. So the plant is built to take on a lot of sun. So try to get it in front of a window. For me, I'm growing it right here. This is my east facing window. So this plant gets a lot of morning light because it's literally smack bang against the window. It's kissing the window, if you will. The alternative is growing the plant on the west side, so that west facing sun. It's a lot hotter. I think you get a few more hours this time of the year as well on that side. So that would be ideal, but there's just no space over there. And there's this big, large door window thing. So the plant is here. And even with the slightly lower light, I don't know if it's less UV rays. I need to look at the science behind that. But we know that the east facing sort of provides that good light, but we know that it's not as intense as the west facing. But even then, the plant is doing just fine and growing to be an absolute beast in this window. So we've covered the watering, the fertilizing, the winter care, and the light conditions. The only other thing that I haven't touched on is the soil. Now, if you've seen the unboxing video, the day that I got this plant, I actually repotted it into some really good, chunky, well-draining soil. And since then, I haven't changed the soil. It's been the exact same. I've had no issues of underwatering, overwatering, nothing. I think it also helps that it's growing in a terracotta pot, so it gets to wick away all of the excess water. That's always a really good call on your cacti and succulents, is to get it into some terracotta planting pots. And then I think, as I said, the plant is quite a simple one to grow. Very simple. Just consider your watering and it will be fine. In terms of pests, I found this plant to be almost bulletproof. I haven't had a single issue with this plant. Nothing soil based, no spider mites, no thrips, nothing. And I'm really happy with that. Now this plant sits right next to my euphorbia. Now this euphorbia, for the past 2 or 3 years, so for as long as I've had this Cereus Blue Cactus, it has had spider mites every single growing season. And this plant sits right next to it. And this plant has never, not even once, had an issue with spider mites. Not even once. So that goes to show you that the plant is a really solid grower and a really resilient and tough plant to grow. And if you're looking for a large plant to bring in that western desert vibe into your home, the Cereus Blue Cactus is the one for you. So there you have it. That is a 3-year update of my Cereus Blue Cactus. Bring on the next 3 years and I want to see how much larger and bigger I can get this plant to grow. But that's it. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep planting.